God,
right,
I am
you could have
rooting for the
dinner
Canadians.
with one giant. Who would it be? That was the tweet that was posted yesterday by the New York Giants. Phil Simms on the photo. I don't know that Phil would be my choice. I think LT would be the guy that I would want to hear tell stories for a few hours as he drank more and more wine. But, Peter, all-time NFL dinner guests, living or dead, anyone we want to pick. That's today's draft, inspired by that Giants tweet. Here is the trivia question to determine the first selection. Who is the only player with 9 or more receiving touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons?
Stephon Diggs.
I would never get this. Marvin Jones.
Oh. Nobody would ever get that. Marvin Jones's mother wouldn't get that.
Marvin Jones possibly wouldn't get it. This is easy for me. I've done no research or preparation. The list begins and ends for me with Aaron Rodgers. Final answer. Come on, Aaron. I'll cook you a steak the way you like it. We'll have some scotch or tequila or both. Let's have a chat. Let's have a conversation. And maybe I'll eventually write some crap that you may choose to read. So come on, Aaron. Let's go have some dinner.
Look, hey, Mike, I just want to tell you, Aaron Rodgers would rather report to the Packers than have dinner.
He'd rather have dinner with Brian Gutekunst than have dinner with me.
Hey, I'll take Vince Lombardi, getting back on a serious note, just because all we know about Vince Lombardi, who now unfortunately has been gone for more than 50 years, all we know is the legend. Now, obviously, I mean, I never met Vince Lombardi. I don't know any football writers alive who, even as a child, would have met or known Vince Lombardi. But I just would be very, very curious to find out if the man matched the legend. I think he probably would.
Peter, do you remember? This is a trivia question that goes way back. Do you remember going to see the Vince Lombardi play?
Yes.
And do you remember who was with you?
Mike Florio.
And your wife. And do you remember who
Yes.
played Vince Lombardi?
Dan, what's his name? Tell me, Mike. Dan
Loria. Dan Loria from the Wonder Years.
Dan Loria,
Dad from
yeah.
the Wonder Years.
Yeah.
Who would also be the
He
dad.
was really good,
when
too.
They did a musical version of A Christmas Story. He was the dad in that as well. All right, next one for me, Bill Belichick. I like to torture myself. I'm used to having dinner with people who don't hate me. I'd like to have dinner with people who do hate me. So I assume Belichick does, just because I think he hates everybody. Because I've always heard, you get him away from football, he's a great guy. He's funny. He's awesome. He's talkative. He's a great guy to be around. Well, that'd be one way to find out. Let's sit down and have a meal, Bill. I'd be honored to do it, but I know that just like Aaron Rodgers, that will never happen.
You know, my next one really would be George Halas. And again, I'm a big fan of football history. I think George Halas was such an interesting guy because you go back to the very roots of the game, and he played in the 20s with the Decatur Staleys and then the Chicago Bears. And then obviously he coached and owned. And I mean, here's a guy who coached Gale Sayers and Dick Butkus and who played against Bronco Nagurski. So, I mean, you know, how do you not want to have the whole encyclopedia to be able to download from George Halas's brain?
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, this guy connected to so many decades of football as a player, a coach, and an owner. I got to go a modern-day figure. And this one's very simple. This is just, there's one piece of curiosity that I would want to have satisfied. I would invite Patrick Mahomes over. I would find out which cut of steak he prefers. I would get the most expensive, best marbled version of it that I could. I want to see how badly he would ruin that with ketchup. I would have to witness the amount of ketchup that he would drown his pieces of steak in, because he is well documented as putting ketchup on everything, including steak. He's told the story. He's been at a restaurant and they give him a hard time because he wants to put ketchup on his steak. It's like, hey, I bought the steak. I'm putting ketchup on it.
If you were allowed a fourth guest, Mike, it sounds like you'd want Jake from State Farm, because you got Aaron Rodgers, you got Patrick Mahomes, and surely Bill Belichick will be the 2022 State Farm ad guy.
Hey, he did Subway. It's a new universe for Bill.
All right, my last guy is going to be a guy who might surprise you a little bit. And, because I think we're all sort of ruled by, when we were growing up, the first person when we watch football who we kind of idolized, and mine would be Fran Tarkenton. I grew up a kid in Connecticut. I was a big Giants fan, and Fran Tarkenton for a while was the quarterback of the New York Giants in between Minnesota Vikings stints. But he was always this, sort of devil-may-care, run around, make things happen guy. Favre before Favre, Mahomes before Mahomes. And then, later in life off the field, he's become this sort of new world guy with so many different and divergent interests. I just think, how about Fran Tarkenton, Vince Lombardi, and George Halas at dinner? That would be sort of interesting.
Well, and we have time for one more round, so I'll add another one to that, a guy who knows Fran Tarkenton pretty well. Let's bring Bud Grant, and let's do it outdoors in the cold with no coats on. Yeah. Bud Grant is the guy who would make it longer than anyone else in that environment, but a guy who has encyclopedic knowledge of all those years that he was a coach. He dates back to the CFL and played for the Lakers. I think, did he play for the Lakers? I think he played for the Lakers.
Played for the Minneapolis Lakers.
Yeah, yep. Yeah. So, there would be plenty of great stories from him as well, Peter. Then there we are walking to the table, 6 below, walking to the table.
He's still doing
outdoors.
Well. He's still doing well. I saw him a couple of years ago in Minneapolis, and he's doing really well. Mike, my last one is going to be Paul Brown. And my first year covering a National Football League team was 1984, when Paul Brown had moved, of course, from coaching the Bengals to owning the Bengals to making all the franchise decisions. And that year in training camp, Paul Brown was there for every practice in his big straw hat, standing on the sidelines. I watched 30 practices with Paul Brown. My only regret is that I never wrote down every word that he said. But I would want to have dinner. I'd want to have Paul Brown there, and I would want to say thank you for helping me get to know a little bit about football.
June 19, there is an event at the high school that Paul Brown attended near Canton, and then Bengals fans will descend on the Hall of Fame to try to rally for more members of the Bengals organization to get in. They've got one so far in Anthony Munoz, so you made me think of that when you mentioned it. And they have like 8 different Bengals players that they're going to try to push to get into the Hall of Fame. They're upset that there's only one Bengal all-time who has made it.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.